Our text this morning is a familiar one, 1 Samuel chapter 17. I want to take a fresh look at one of the greatest stories ever told, that of David and Goliath. You know, sometimes things in life are not as we perceive them to be. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We don't have any dogs now, but one of our last dogs was Darlene. And Darlene was what I would call an extreme rescue. During the crash of 2009, her mom, pregnant, was kind of left out into the national park, and so Darlene was born there out in the wild and had, I think, probably brothers and sisters, but when she was found, she was trying to keep up with her mom. They couldn't get the mom, but they got Darlene, about the size of a baked potato, and just a complete mess, just a disaster. But she turned out to be just a really, really wonderful and sweet dog. She assumed that all of humanity rescued her. And so she was, we called her the street greeter. You know, anyone she saw, she'd run up the street to meet somebody for the very first time. So I'm talking to our Jewish neighbors who are up the street one day, and he says to me, "Did I tell you what happened at our Seder?" And I said, "No." Now, for those of you who don't know, Seder takes place in the first two days of Passover, and they tell the story of the Egyptians, releasing the Israelites, and then they have a meal, and after the meal, symbolically, the host gets up and goes to opens the door, the front door, to let Elijah in. And he got up and opened the door, and in walked Darlene. Darlene is Elijah. Who knew? Not at all what you would perceive it to be. The second story involves my brother, Larry. Larry is a piece of work. The first time Melinda met Larry was at a family reunion, and I saw her over there talking to and interacting with him, and she came over to me and she said, "Larry is Kramer." And I said, "You are absolutely correct. He is Kramer." So picture Kramer, in this particular story. So in the summer of college, he got a job with Mayflower, the big moving company. And so their job in this case was down the center street of Vallejo, which is a large town, and Tennessee Street, and this is the main boulevard. And so they go up to the 6th floor. There's no elevator, top story of one of the old buildings, and here's a gentleman who they're moving. And they said, where are we taking your belongings to? And he said, "I don't care." He said, "My retirement's come in, and they've positioned me somewhere, furniture, everything's included. Do what you want with it. If you want to keep some of it, fine." And they looked around and saw there's nothing they wanted to keep. So it's a hot day. They're 6 floors up with no elevator. And my brother's standing over at the window thinking. He actually took the window out, sent his partner down below with the back of the Mayflower truck open. "Chest your drawers!" And they threw all the furniture down, picked up the kindling and threw it in the back of the truck. Now imagine you're with your wife and you're traveling down the street, contemplating your next move as to who you might want to use. Okay? My goodness, no thought at all. Well, I think David experienced something like those two stories when he entered the battlefield for the first time. And his reaction, I think, was probably much the same. What's going on here? This should not be happening. Turn with me to 1 Samuel 17. Let me set the scene for you. We have two opposing armies, the Israelites and the Philistines, but they're not fighting each other. They're standing on two hills with a valley in between. A champion, verse 4, remember that word, named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. Verse 8, Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up in battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of the living God of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all of the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. We now learn that Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed King Saul into this war. David, the youngest, was at home taking care of the sheep. Verse 16, for 40 days, 6 weeks, the Philistine Goliath came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. It's hard to believe that this charade could go on and has been going on for 6 weeks, morning and evening. Can you imagine? At this point in the story, Jesse puts together some Lunchables and he sends David into the battle, right, to find his brothers and see what's going on and report back to his father. This is where the story gets really interesting. Because when David arrives, similar to the chest of drawers being thrown out the window, things are not at all what he perceived they would be. He watches as Goliath, the giant Philistine champion, walks to the middle of those opposing armies and shouts his defiant speech, mocking the Israelites. And to David's utter astonishment, the whole Israelite army is scared to death. David's got to be thinking, has no one here read the book of Joshua? Then he can't believe his ears. He overhears some of the soldiers say that the king has promised 3 things to anyone who will kill this foul-mouthed giant. Personally, I think it was the third one that reeled him in. The first one was great wealth. That's good. The second, the king's daughter in marriage. Don't know, haven't met her, That one could be risky. But number 3, pay no taxes for the rest of your life. Now we're talking, right? Shocked that no one has taken the deal, David asks, verse 26, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? And I love David's attitude here because he can't believe what's happening. His next statement tells you everything you need to know about David's faith and his relationship with God. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? What's going on here? Now skip ahead to verse 32. David tells Saul, don't worry about this Philistine, I'll go fight him. Saul says, you're not able to go fight him. You're only a young man. He's been a warrior from his youth. David then says to Saul, wait a minute, not so fast. I may not have fought as a soldier, but as a shepherd to rescue my sheep, I've killed both a lion and a bear. Verse 37, the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. I love that. David says, God did it then, and God can do it now. So Saul says, all righty then. Knock yourself out. Go and the Lord be with you. Now the story takes a humorous turn. Saul, who's believed to be 6'7", the mighty warrior of Israel, who's been sitting on the sidelines biting his fingernails in fear, proceeds to fit little David with his armor, helmet, sword, and shield. David stumbles around and says, I can't go in these. They're heavy, they don't fit. So he took them off. Then wisely, he reverts to what he knows best and does best, his sling. Picking up 5 smooth stones from the stream, he puts them in his pouch and approaches Goliath. Verse 41. Meanwhile, Goliath, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. Oh, Goliath's pride is hurt. He's insulted because after 6 weeks of shouting to professional fighting men, choose a man and have someone come down and fight me, they send him this little pretty boy with a slingshot. You can't make this up. Verse 43, Goliath said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" Then he cursed David by his gods and shouts, "Come here and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." And now we come to one of my favorite parts of this story. David said to Goliath, and this is some good Old Testament trash talk right here. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in heaven. All those gathered here will know that it is not by the sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Then, verse 49, reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck Goliath. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down Goliath and killed him. In Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, subtitled Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants, he flips the script, proposing that David was not the underdog. He pointed out that expert slingers, as they were called in that day, were highly skilled and very accurate. Their projectile of choice, the rocks of the region, were most likely barium sulfate, which are twice the density of a normal stone. The stopping power of a hurled stone is equivalent to a .45 caliber handgun and could hit a target 200 yards away. As for Goliath, there's reasonable evidence that he was somewhat handicapped. The most common form of giantism is acromegaly, brought on by a benign tumor of the pituitary gland, which causes an overproduction of human growth hormone. The symptoms are double vision and profound nearsightedness, which would explain Goliath saying, "You come at me with sticks," when David just had his single staff. My guess is that the truth lies somewhere in the middle and not as extreme on either end. In other words, David was not this inexperienced boy shooting at the giant with a kid's slingshot, like the ones I used to break so many windows with as a kid. And Goliath might have needed corrective contacts to see better, but he was a formidable warrior of renown. The part of the story that I want to focus on is this. David was the only one who saw things differently in this battle. Saul, the mighty king of Israel, and the entire army of fighting men stood wringing their hands in fear, refusing to get in the fight. Admitting on the one hand that they served the living God, the Lord of heaven's armies, the creator God, the only capital G God, and yet willfully they did nothing to fight the forces of evil from capturing and destroying their nation and their way of life. To which I ask, what's up with that? Regrettably, there are many Christians today who, faced with the same scenario as depicted with David and Goliath, that is, an evil army threatening to destroy the nation, would do the exact same thing that the army of Israel did. Nothing. They would sit on their hands, refusing to fight. They would say, "We'll pray for you. We'll share the gospel with you, but we're not going to enter the conflict." I often hear this contextualized as Christians should stay out of politics. When you say that, you step right into Satan's trap. That's his great deception. One of Satan's most masterful art of war tactics is to make everything political, knowing that he can then depend on the "we don't want to be political Christians" to stay on the sidelines. What's happening today is not political. It's evil. It's straight from the pit of hell. Human trafficking is not political. Killing babies before they're born is not political. Not arresting or punishing criminals is not political. Murder is not political. Preying on the innocence of our children is not political. Lying to and surgically mutilating young people is not political. Pedophilia and pornography is not political. Not punishing people who call evil good and good evil is not political. Demanding that people deny proven scientific truth and facts is not political. It's evil, and it will destroy our civilization. It seems that nearly every day another agent of Satan steps out and trash talks the living God, mocking all that we call good and decent and healthy for society. And what are we supposed to do? How do you see it? I'll tell you how I see it. I see it differently, like David. I ask, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? The Lord has delivered us in the past, and he'll deliver us in the future from those who want to tear us apart as a nation. The only difference between then and now is that most enemy attacks in the past came from the outside. Today, they're coming from within. They're just as evil, they're just as destructive, and the goal is the same: surrender. And trust me, they're going to win unless those who say they believe in God and goodness and truth and beauty and the law and morality don't stand up and fight. So I'm going to pray, and I'm going to take every opportunity to give a reason for the hope that I have in Christ. But I'm also going to fight for all it's worth. If not for myself, then for my children and grandchildren. Here's how I see it. It's not an either or. It's an and too. It's not that as a child of God, I'm to just focus on sharing the gospel. I can also love my neighbors, my neighborhood, my city, my schools, my state, and my country, and fight the enemies trying to destroy them. Maybe I'm naive, but I believe I can multitask. I can love God, love my neighbor, and fight evil. I can believe in and long for the new heaven and the new earth, and fight for all that's right and good on the earth that I'm currently living on. Like Jesus, I'm to promote and love all that is good and hate and call out all that is bad and evil. If I see evil and can call attention to it or stop it, I should do so. Jesus obliterated the idea that Christians should be pacifists when he made a whip and personally drove out those who were desecrating righteousness and exploiting the poor. Jesus was loving and dangerous, gentle with the broken, and terrifying to the wicked. Jesus gave us some New Testament smack talk with how he spoke to the religious rulers, which were the equivalent of our government officials today. Hypocrites, blind fools, blind guides, whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones, straining out a gnat but swallowing a camel. You snakes, you brood of vipers. How will you escape being condemned to hell? Why don't you say what you really mean, Jesus? The popular saying, God helps those who help themselves, is not in the Bible. And though it has a ring of truth, it's problematic, especially as it pertains to salvation, where God helps only those who realize they cannot help themselves at all. The more biblically accurate saying would be, God expects us to do our part. And we see many examples of this in Scripture. When I was in high school, I grew up, there were 5 of us kids, and my mom played the piano and the organ at church, and we were a very musical family. And I sang some instruments and different things. All of us participated in one way or another, but my thing was singing. And so in high school, I was one of a few guys who was in the a cappella choir. Now, we did as a choir two things. We alternated. We either went on tour, so we had prepared and put together a program and went on tour, or we did a musical. And this year, the decision was to do a musical, The Unsinkable Molly Brown. And so they had tryouts for 3 nights, and for the different parts. And I never showed up. And the reason I didn't show up is because the choir director obviously didn't know, because we just sang in class, didn't have a lot of conversation. But I had a stuttering problem. I stuttered. And I'd learned conversationally to kind of what the trip words were and could get by. But I took a note literally in class to the teacher at the beginning of the year saying, please don't make me stand up and read anything or call on me to answer a question, because it will embarrass both you and me. I went to special classes, after class through elementary school and on through middle school. So it's the last tryout, and I get a call from the director. It's about 9 o'clock. He said, Dave, where are you? I said, I'm not coming. He said, you have to come. I picked this musical for you to play the lead, the male lead. You have to come. And so I disclosed to him that I can do the singing parts, no problem, but there is no way I'm standing up in front of, at that time, this was a school of 4,000, high school, of 1,000 people for 3 nights, and stutter my way through the other lines. And he just denied that the problem existed and kept coming at me and finally he talked me into it against my better judgment. And I went down and sang a few bars and got the part, and I was scared to death. So scared that I worked harder, I guarantee you, at memorizing my lines and going over and over and over and over them and enunciating and all that I had to do, because I was so frightened to make sure that I wouldn't embarrass myself. The first night, I did my part and never stuttered through any of those, and effectively never stuttered again. Absolute miracle. Was God capable of simply fixing my stuttering problem without my going through all of that? Absolutely. So it leaves me wondering, why didn't he? Was God capable of zapping Goliath with a bolt of lightning from heaven? Absolutely. Why didn't he? He didn't need to. In his providence, he sent in the most unlikely warrior anyone could possibly imagine. A God-loving, God-fearing, poet-writing musician who looked after sheep. In comes a shepherd boy bringing Lunchables to the soldiers, who happened to have a sling in his pocket. But better yet, this formerly untrained and ill-equipped teenager saw things differently. He couldn't believe his eyes and ears. Here was the mighty army of Israel, descendants of those who marched around Jericho, blowing trumpets and watching the walls fall down, cowering in fear because a cross-eyed, nearsighted giant was threatening them. Could they not see that this was an assault against the living God? By faith, David, recalling past victories against seemingly overwhelming odds, and I would call killing a bear and a lion in close combat overwhelming odds, volunteered to be the champion in this fight. Everyone else thought Goliath was too big to beat. David thought he was too big to miss. Everyone else was praying for a miracle. And I guarantee you, David was praying too, while he picked up some rocks and ran into the battle. Everyone else came forward every day for 40 days and listened to Goliath trash talk the creator of the universe. 80 times they stood there and took it. Can you imagine? David said enough of that and gave it right back to the big pagan punk. C.S. Lewis said, courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point. Lukewarm Christianity has become so normal that biblical Christianity seems radical. Let me wrap up by putting this into perspective. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. I know I've got you all lathered up. Please don't leave here saying, Dave Hubbard said we should pick up some rocks and go start fighting. No, I'm being hyperbolic. Okay. Some people will say, what would Jesus do? But in my opinion, in this instance, that question's irrelevant. And here's why. Jesus did not live in a constitutional republic where people elect representatives to govern on their behalf. In the words of Abraham Lincoln, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. As Christians, we should see things differently. We should recognize that the evil that persists is an assault against the living God. Why was it that David alone was able to see things differently? We learned that in the previous chapter, verse 13, that, quote, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on. Well, guess what? If you're a Christian here this morning, you have that same Spirit working powerfully within you. We have no excuse. We, like David, should see things differently. We should love God and love our family and those around us enough to get off the sidelines and enter the conflict. 1 Corinthians 3:9 says, for we are God's fellow workers. We're not spectators in God's plan. He saved us not only for heaven, but also for service. He has called us to play a part in his kingdom work. From the garden to the return of Christ, God is at work making all things right. And like David, we're called to step into the battlefield, to restore what is broken and build what matters. And when we stand up for what is right, good, true, just, holy, we're often accused of getting too political. Don't fall into that trap. We're a free nation. It's not that we as Christians suddenly got more political. It's that politics suddenly got more theological and spiritual. Our government went from rebuilding roads to redefining marriage, from fighting crime to erasing gender, from protecting our most innocent and vulnerable to reframing child murder as reproductive health care. I'll close with this. Early in the story, Goliath is called a champion. That word champion in Hebrew means the following: a man between two. One who stands in the gap and fights for everyone by engaging in a single battle. Love is standing in the gap against evil, fighting against things that will hurt your loved ones and others. We need more champions.